I believe we're now live with the mighty Mike McGee joining us for this hour. This is very, very exciting. I'm very, very excited. All right, Mike, you have a very, very strong resume, which I will tell later once I look it up online, and I will share with the audience at that point in time. But first, can you open with a poem?
Sure thing. Yeah. Uh, I wrote this for someone I cared very much about, and realized in the process of writing it that it was never going to be, but I could still care for them. Goes like this. Every day, I rewrite her name across my chest so that those who wish to break my heart will know who to answer to later. She has no idea that I taught my tongue how to make pennies, and every time our mouths were to meet, I would have slipped a coin to the back of her throat and made a wish. Because I wish that someday my head on her belly might look like home, like doubt to doubt resuscitation, because time is supposed to mean more than skin. She doesn't know that I taught my arms to close around her clocks so that we could both withstand the fallout from her autumn. She is so explosive. Volcanoes watch her and learn. Terrorists want to strap her to their chest because she's a cause worth dying for. Maybe someday time will teach me to pick up her pieces, put her back together, remind her to click her heels, but she doesn't need a Wizard of Oz to remind her that I was here all along. Lady, let's catch the next tornado home. Let's plant cantaloupe trees in our backyard, and then one of these days I'll remind you that I do not like cantaloupe, and they sure as hell don't grow on trees, but we can laugh about it. Then maybe we can plant things we've never heard of, because I've never heard of someone who can make flawed look so beautiful the way you do. And the word smitten is to how I feel about you, what a kiss is to romance. So maybe my lips to yours could be the penance to this confession, because I'm the only one preaching your defunct religion, sitting alone at your altar, praising you out of faith. We cannot do these hard knock lives alone. You are all the softness a rock dreams of being, the mistakes the rain makes at picnics when Mother Nature bears witness in much, much better places. So yes, I will gladly take on your ocean just to swim beneath you, so that I can kiss the bends of your knees in appreciation for the work they do, keeping your head above water. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'm muted. Okay, I'm unmuted. Yeah, damn good. Yeah. So I want to ask you first of all, that was a very excellent poem. So that was for a poem you wrote, and midway through you realized it was not going to happen, or it was not going to.
I think I always knew. I think I was writing this poem in the hopes that it would win her over. I think I was writing this poem in the hope that she would see, like, oh man,
Yeah.
Oh dude, this guy cares about me hard.
Yeah.
And maybe that's enough,
Yeah.
Is that someone who cares about you, someone who doesn't know themselves very well yet, someone who's, in his late 20s and still figuring things out, has no idea what he's doing, no clue, has no sense of direction, but he cares, damn it. He cares.
Yeah, I think kind of looked at that. Yeah.
And he deserves to have someone care for him back, I think that's where the poem really was. It wasn't a matter of like, oh, she loved me and then took it away. It was more of I wasn't her type. I was her most things, but physically I wasn't her type, and I think honestly, like, she was just so different than the image I'd put in my head of her. There are people, I think, in the world where you sort of see them in one way, and then the more you get to know them, the more you realize, and maybe it's too late by that point, but you realize, like, man, I built a fantasy around you, and I'm glad I caught it. I'm glad I realized that now, but me and this person, see, I have this weird thing with like numerology, not numerology. That's the wrong way to put it, but I love coincidences. And her birthday was the day after mine, and with the same exact initials, MMM. And I was like, come on, like, our monogram towels are going to be so easy, so easy. M's on everything.
Yeah.
But it's just dumb. It was just young
Did you tell her
naivety. Yeah, I mean, of course, I joked about that stuff all the time. But it was just like, I think for in my world, I needed someone like her to be my person, and in her world, she needed someone like me to show up from time to time and make her laugh, to be a good friend, to be someone she could confide in, but she didn't want to be lovers, and that's her prerogative. That's her, like, yeah, it sucks when you have feelings for somebody and they don't have feelings for you back, but it's not a crime. It's not a crime, and it's not even like anyone who points a finger at that person and says you didn't love me, it's like, yeah, you got me. Yeah, yeah, I didn't love you. Like, I'm sorry, but it's a switch that you can't just necessarily turn on, yourself. Like, it comes over time. So,
yeah.
And I don't think we would have been compatible anyway. I think that the fantasy version of this person, I had her as compatible, and I still know her and we're still friends. We're still acquaintances, and she's a nice person, mother of 2 now. And, it's just, it is what it is. I'm not, like, that was a long time ago. And I pined over it for a bit until I realized I was like, I got other shit I got to do, So, yeah. So that love poem was, yeah.
Was the same person, but the I like you like whales.
Same person. Yeah.
She wrote a series.
Oh yeah. Oh, there's at least 6 poems that became like, like signature pieces of mine. I got the best. I think the best one I wrote out of all of that was I wrote one called "Open Letter to Neil Armstrong," and it's like talking about distance and like loving somebody even though they're far away. And I had been on the road and I was trying to prove to her, like, hey, just because I'm gone doesn't mean I don't still care about you and love you. And that whole time, I think she was seeing somebody else anyway. So I'm like, I'm an idiot. So
you got poetry. You got all this poetry that is.
I got some great poems out of it that helped me win some championships.
Yeah.
That got other people to be like, hey, you're dope. I'll care about you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's life.
There is always a silver lining. It's usually not the one you've been hoping for,
I want to ask you about your travels and your experience in slam and all those things, but you got to kind of start off on this philosophical note. Yeah, I mean, you can't put too much. You cannot build your life around what you want other people to do that they have not indicated they want to do.
Right.
That's some weak scaffolding. That's precarious straits.
Yeah.
Danger ahead. Okay. So you've written these poems. You've written a plethora of poems, and they've taken you all over the place. Can you talk about a little bit about your tell us a little about your travels, Mike McGee?
Oh, there were a lot of them. So in 2000 and up until 2002, I had never left. No, I take that back. So in 2001, my first foray into traveling for poetry was me and a couple of friends hopped into a car. We actually borrowed a car from an exotic dancer that we knew. And we piled into her car. She didn't come with us. She stayed home with her kid. But us 4 guys went on this tour where we performed in like Portland. I guess Portland and Eugene. I think that was it, in Oregon. And that was my first trek outside of the state to do poetry. And I loved it. I thought, wow, I didn't know the little poetry slam that I was affiliated with in San Jose and throughout the Bay Area, Oakland and San Francisco. I didn't know that things that we were doing here were also happening in other places to that level. I got on the slam team that summer. And that year I'd also met Shane Koizan. And Shane Koizan had just won the Nationals, and he was doing the National Poetry Slam, and he was doing his big, like, second round of hitting all his favorite spots in the U.S. On his, like, basically like his second tour after winning. And I finally met him in the Bay in San Francisco, and we did not hit it off. I think it was just 2 fat dudes who were trying to be the funniest guys in the group, and I had a leg on him because we were with all my friends here in the Bay, and he was, I think he felt a little, intimidated, right?
Yeah, like Bay joke, like home, like
right, and we'll just
guerrilla humor.
And I know the people I'm trying to make laugh. I know them well. Yeah. So there's nothing better than knowing somebody to be able to make them laugh, right? So Khoisan was a little intimidated, I think, at that point. But I was also intimidated. I'm like, here's the national champion, and he seems mad at me because I'm funny, And all of a sudden, everyone leaves, and we're outside smoking. This is back when I smoked. And he's like, all right, everyone goes inside. No one sees this. And he takes his cigarette and he goes, hey, take care of this for me. And he flicks his cigarette and it hits me in the cheek. And I was like, did that just really happen?
Yeah,
that's like movie asshole type shit. You know what I mean? That's like Usual Suspects,
Yeah.
And he just goes inside and I'm just standing there.
He didn't stand? He was like,
yeah. He just flicked it in my face and went inside. And I was like,
that's what happens.
Yeah. And I was flabbergasted. I went inside and I basically told my crew, I was like, this Canadian prick sucks. I don't want to have anything to do with him. And, but he was supposed to headline in San Jose at the San Jose Poetry Slam the next night. And I was going to be there. I never missed it. I never missed a slam. But I figured, you know what? I'll go for the first half, and then when it's his turn to feature, I'll leave. I'll dip out. And so I show up, and he comes over. I get there a little early. He shows up, and I'm civil with him. I try to be courteous with him, but I'm angry. And he goes, everyone goes inside, and he's sitting out there with me, and I'm just thinking, like, great, is he going to flick another cigarette at my face? He goes, hey, man, can I talk to you? And I was like, sure. He goes, listen, that was really messed up what I did last night, and I don't know what came over me. I'm really, really sorry. It was really shitty of me to do that to you. And he won me over, And then I went up to Portland for another poetry event. They used to do this regional salmon slam in the Pacific Northwest, and the San Jose team went up, and I knew that he was going to be there because he was going to be on the Vancouver team. He was from Vancouver, and I was kind of excited to catch up with him again. And so we met up, and we ended up hanging out the whole time. We were inseparable. I had written a parody of a poem of his, and I was going to do it in the competition against him because I knew he was going to do his poem. Yeah. And but I going against some of my team's wishes, I went and asked him first, like, would you be okay if I read this parody of your poem? And because what better 1-2 punch than for somebody to get up and do this like killer piece that helped them win nationals, and then I get up and make fun of the whole poem, right? And he looked at me, he's just like, no, I don't want you to do it. And I was like, okay, fair enough. And I did another poem. My team hated me, but he thought that was the dopest thing somebody could have done. He was just like, you could have just done the poem, and I would have had to deal with it. He's like, but you asked me first, and you didn't do it, and that was cool. And he goes, from that point on, I was like, I think I need to be friends with this guy. So he convinced me to go. He said, you got to come up to Vancouver. I will get you some shows. And he did. About a year later, he set me up with about 7 shows in 8 days. Oh, wow. And I did. Granted, some of them were like, in a tiny little, like, there was one, it was the Baghdad Cafe. It was this run by these Yemeni gentlemen. And when they found out that an American was coming to perform, they were like really nervous. And they just looked at me. They're like, so do you like Bush? And I was like, no, not at all. And they're like, okay, welcome. You hungry? And so had a great time going to Vancouver. And I kind of got the bug. I was like, you know what? I think I want to try this. I want to like go around the country and see other places, but nobody knows who I am. So it's not going to do me any good. I have to like still build up maybe in a few years. Well, the next summer I won the National Poetry Slam, and I just had this really solid season. Every slam I entered, I won. Didn't matter where it was, all along the West Coast. If I entered a slam, I won, or if I was in a bout, I usually took a 30 in a slam, which is the highest score you can get. And I just had a good year. I had one really good year that led me to the Nationals and that led me to touring. And weirdly enough, Shane and I both ended up in the finals of that nationals, and it came down to us two essentially. I mean, there were four in the last round, but we both ended up with the highest scores, and I beat him by about a half a point. And I took the title. He took second. And we decided that night, we decided even before that we were going to tour together. And I thought, this is great. Shane's got a good name in the slam scene. And nobody really knows who I am. And then I win the nationals, and now people in the scene know who I am. And they love Shane. I'm like, this is perfect. We should be forming a group together. And so we formed a group called Tons of Fun University, or TOFU. And we joined up with C.R. Avery, musician based out of Vancouver, and we formed a band. And we performed a ton. But it was right after I won the nationals. I went home, and I had asked Shane, I was like, what do I do now? I got a trophy and a check. He goes, well, pay your rent and then go on tour. He's like, you get to be a poet for the rest of your life now. And I thought about that long and hard, and to the point where when I got home, I hadn't checked my email the whole time I was at the Nationals, which was in Chicago that year, 2003. I had checked my email, and there were 100 email messages waiting for me. Wow. Of people asking me to come to their venue and headline, right? All slams, and all of them were offering like, an average of about $40 a piece and some food, So it wasn't like I was going to go out there and make a shit ton of money.
Yeah. But that adds up if it's all in the same city. It's a couple omelets and $100. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and it was like, it was the whole country too. That was the thing, was it was just like the whole country just opened up to me, and they all wanted me to come out. And so whether I was ready or not, I had to get ready, and I didn't have a job. So I was unemployed anyway. And I was like, well, what do I have to lose? All I need to do is make like $400 and some odd a month for rent and send it back home, and I'm golden. My first tour ended up being about 10 months long. I ended up being on tour for like 10 months. And then like, I would just take these little tiny breaks. I'd come home, kind of recharge, sleep in, not get on a bus, and that's how I did most of my traveling, was buses, trains. It wasn't until like maybe the second or third year where I was able to like start like affording to be able to get on flights, but things moved pretty quickly. And then I taped for Def Poetry Jam in 2004 and 2005. They only aired my performance in 2005. But that was fun. It was a neat opportunity to be on that show. And that kind of like it, I don't know that it necessarily put my name out there further. I mean, maybe a little bit, but like what it did was it made my resume look that much better, And I think that's the thing you're doing when you're hitting the road and you're collecting gigs, is that you're padding your resume. You're saying, you're just making it thicker and thicker, and you're giving people a reason to check it out. It's like, man, this is a tome. Look at this thing, Jesus.
Yeah. So what was HBO Def Poetry Jam like?
It was wild because it was in this old theater in New York. It was my first time going to New York, and the experience was funny. The first time was really funny because I had no gigs because I knew that Def Poetry Jam was coming. The shooting schedule was coming up, and I hadn't heard back. I hadn't heard back from the folks that do the booking for it. And so I wasn't sure if I was even going to be picked. But I couldn't schedule anything out for like the next 9-10 days because I knew that was the shooting schedule. And that if they did pick me, I'd have to fly to New York immediately. Right. So, and here's a funny thing. It's funny how like I used to get really upset with the Poetry Lounge because I would go down there, I would headline, I would feature, maybe I'd get paid, maybe I wouldn't, and it was always frustrating because I'm like, if I'm in LA, I need to make money, like it's expensive to just like hang out in LA when you're not from there, and luckily I had really good friends that lived down there so I could crash with friends. But it was just like, I'm eating out every night, if I'm there for 4 or 5 days, that's $150, $200, if you're a traveling poet. So, but I would sell CDs and that would usually help. And then I get down there and they didn't pay me one night. But what I didn't know was that the producer for Def Poetry Jam was in the audience. And it's the first time in my life I can honestly say where like the exposure actually worked. You know, you're always told like, well, you'll get exposure. LA is the only place I ever heard that phrase was like, oh, we're not going to pay you, but you're going to get exposure. And I'm like,
so I'm actually interested to hear, because here in LA we're always that's bullshit, right? You know, blah, blah,
right.
blah. That's bullshit. And you in your city in San Jose or any other city would know that that's bullshit.
It's
but
bullshit.
For some reason, my LA arrogance is telling me, yeah, you come to LA, you're gonna get some exposure.
Yeah,
you should be so lucky. But
you should be so lucky, and I was. It worked. It actually worked.
You see,
Stan Latham was there, and he was producing Def Poetry that at that time, and he was in the audience, and he liked me, and he told Shihan that he's like, hey, get that guy's tape, and then we were still submitting videotapes. So so I got him a tape, and then the guy who got the tape was this guy Walter Mudu. And he calls me randomly one night. He's like, from his home in Brooklyn. He's like, Mike McGee. I go, hey, what? Hello. He goes, hey, this is Walter Mudu. Do you know who I am? And I go, nope, no idea. And he goes, I'm an agent, but I'm also the dude that collects all the tapes for Def Poetry Jam. And I was like, oh, cool. He goes, man, you're in. All right. I'm just gonna let you know right now. Like, I'm doing everything I can to make sure that you get in. I was like, okay, great, cool. That's amazing. He goes, do you have an agent? Do you have representation? I go, no, I don't. He goes, would you like it? And I go, I've never had a good, I mean, the one agent I had before didn't really know what they were doing. I'm like, I could look into it, you know? And he's like, well, if you want representation, I think what you got can work. And so we ended up getting into a business relationship, he and I. And we did a bunch of NACA conferences, the National Association of Campus Activities, which is like a great moneymaker for people who get in there and get noticed right away. And the first couple of years, first few years we did it, we cleaned up. Like, we made really good money. And I did a lot of college gigs, a ton of college gigs, which then made it so that I could like go to St. Louis, you know, do a college gig and then hit up whatever slams I wanted to and not even worry about making any money because I just made all the money I need to make at this college gig, you know. That kept me afloat and it kept me going to all these different slams. And I mean, up until 2008, I hit almost every single slam there was in the country, which was a few hundred, you know. But then what was crazy is that I taped for Def Poetry Jam in 2004. I fly out there. It's my first time. Oh, so I'm in Austin, Texas, waiting to hear if I'm on. And sure enough, I get the call and they're like, we're going to buy you a flight out to New York City and you're going to tape on this day. So you need to be here the day before and then blah, blah. So I get there and it's the first time I've ever like come out of, you know, I land in LaGuardia. There's a guy standing with a sign that says McGee on it. I'm like, whoa, I've never had anybody waiting with my name before, you know, to pick me up. I get into a town car. We drive from LaGuardia to Manhattan. And I'm just like looking out the window like a little kid, you know, just like, oh my God, it's New York City. I can't believe this. And it was really exhilarating. I get there and I rehearsed my poem in front of Stan Latham and a few other folks. And you're supposed to do 2 poems. And both my poems timed out at like 3:10 because they were slam poems. And he goes, you're going to cut those down, right? And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, you only got 2 minutes each, 2 minutes per poem. And I was like, I'll try. I'll do what I can. He goes, okay. So I taped like the next day. And who was on my show? Who was on that one? I think that was KRS-One and Dougie Fresh were on that episode. And maybe Tracy Morgan. Was Tracy Morgan on that one? Or he was maybe the following year. Anyhow, long story short, my poems were too long. And they emailed me like months later and they're like, listen, we're trying to cut down your poems to fit for time, but it's just not possible. You talk too fast. And so we're gonna have to. We're not gonna be able to air anything that you made that you read on camera. I was bummed out, but at the same time, like I still got paid and I still had a great time, you know. Then the next year they just contacted me. They're like, "Hey, do you want to try it again?" I was like, "Sure." So I went, and my favorite story about that experience was being backstage and Most Def coming out, popping his head in the room, and it was me and like 6 youth poets, because this is right when they were about to transition from adult poets on Def Poetry Jam to just primarily just doing youth poets. And so I'm like the oldest person in the room at this point, at like 30, and and Most Def pops his head in and he looks around and he looks at me and he just goes, "Oh, hey, welcome back." And I was like, "Thanks."
Yeah.
And then he leaves. And then later on, he borrowed a lighter from me.
Yeah.
And I told you that story about how.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Well, yeah. It's no. It's for another time. It's really so silly. It's so silly. Like I feel so bad telling that story sometimes. But to hassle Most Def, TLDR, I hassled Most Def to give me my lighter back in front of 3 members of likely the Nation of Islam, and I looked horrible doing it, and didn't realize it in the moment. It wasn't until afterward that I walked away thinking, I'm a jackass. I am a total jackass. That's probably the quickest I've ever told that story.
Your story. You should quit smoking, man. Like it's not working out for you.
Oh, I did. Yeah, 8 years ago.
Yeah. Getting, national slam champions flipping cigarettes in your face. You got these. It's no good.
No.
But eventual good comes.
Oh yeah. And then I was on the road from 2003 to 2014. And I would say like 24, like all the way through 2013, honestly, because I hardly did any touring in 2014. I moved around. I lived in a lot of places: Massachusetts, Portland, Oregon, Bellingham, Washington. I spent a lot of time in Vancouver, BC. I had a couple of girlfriends up there, and over the course of 10 years, I dated various people, and they always seemed to be well outside of California. Something about loving somebody at long distance is really strange. It's very strange, and very complicated and very weird, and it takes a lot of learning, a lot of understanding, a lot of compassion. I ran myself to the ground. I got to the point where I felt like I was probably going to die if I kept touring. Yeah. And after 10 solid years, almost 11, I was done. I was really done, and I just needed to settle in somewhere and be me for a little bit. Like, who is Mike McGee? Not Mighty Mike McGee, but who's Mike? Who's Michael? Does my family still love me? Am I, of course they do. But I mean, like, do I love myself? Like, what do I think of myself? Like, yeah. I've had all this time to think on the road, but it's more like, how do I market myself? How do I get my name out there? How do I do this? How do I do that? And I figured out a lot of it, but it's a hustle. It's a grind. And if you're not ready for that grind, and if you're not willing to let a team develop with you to do that, to say, hey, here's the product. The product is Mighty Mike McGee. How are we going to get it out there? Instead, you're saying, I am Mighty Mike McGee. I am the product, and I'm the marketer, and I'm this, and I'm that. I am my own manager. And it's like, oh man, and you have a drinking problem? Okay. you are screwed, So I learned a lot in that time, and I had to come back home and process it. So since 2014, I've been back in San Jose, and really loving being home, really loving being here. And instead of touring the country and touring the world, I now tour my county. I tour my city, and I do a lot of workshops and a lot of poetry events here in San Jose, and it's been great.
you're such a good storyteller because I was gonna try and smoothly transition into and then the hero comes home, right? Like I was gonna try and like guide your
Mm.
odyssey. You,
I
you,
like I like
into like
telling stories. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, no,
Yeah.
yeah, you're making this either very easy or very hard for me because I'm trying to find a point
Yeah.
to me being here. All right, so so you return to San Jose, you come back, you start up this new thing called Live Lit, um,
Writers
Live
open mic.
Writers Open Mic. There we go, Live Lit
Yeah.
Writers Open Mic. Tell us about Live Lit Writers Open Mic.
So
How did it all get
so
started?
in my earliest days, before I ever went on tour, back in 98, 99, 2000, I was going to a regular open mic every week. It was at the time it was called Baka Talk. And everyone that had inspired me to do poetry, to do comedy, to do all of the things I wanted to do on stage, were pretty much centered around that open mic. But it's funny because it was very short lived in the grand scheme of things. It was only around for a couple of years, but it was a hotbed of performance. Everybody in San Jose who wanted to get on stage by themselves had an opportunity to do it there. And I was a super regular. I tried to help organize it. I tried to help be a part of it. My housemate at the time, he and I formed a record label. He started it, and I helped him mix and master these recordings. And he would get all these recordings of poets. He would go to various poetry slams and open mics, and he would just record poets. Then he'd bring all the recordings home, and I would mix and master them, and then we'd put them out as a product. And we transitioned from making tapes in the 90s to making CDs in the 2000s. And that was pretty short lived too, but I learned a lot by listening to a lot of poetry, a lot of spoken word at that time, just from like wearing headphones like these and just mixing and mastering over and over and over again. And it got really, it was like a crash course in spoken word, a crash course in performance poetry for me. And so I was going to these open mics downtown, or just one really, every week. And so I thought, well, the only way people are going to get the practice they need in San Jose is if there's a weekly regular open mic, a constant source of expression, a place to express yourself. So I thought, well, I need a venue that is willing to let me take over one of their nights and just have a live mic ready to go for anyone who wants to share words. The coffee shop that we were originally at, that you've been to a couple of times, that was a perfect spot for Live Lit Writers Open Mic. And I specifically wanted it to be in a space that was where you could just kind of come and go, your standard cafe open mic. And I called it Live Lit Writers Open Mic because I didn't want to lock it into just poetry. I figure there's tons of writers out there. They all need an outlet. We don't need a music open mic because they already had one there on a different night. We didn't need a comedy open mic because they already had one there on a different night. So I thought, let's just focus on writers. Whether or not you want to share your own writing or somebody else's writing, this is a place to do it. And it went really well. I mean, up until COVID-19, up until this Rona, that's really messed up it's messed up all live events at this point. So we're all in the same boat when it comes to performing live on a stage. I cannot wait to get on. I mean, the reason I even set up this microphone is because I miss being on the mic,
Yeah.
Also, it sounds better than my computer. But I mean, I knew that if given the chance, if people knew about Live Lit Writers Open Mic, that San Jose would build back up this sort of open micness that I got to experience 20 years earlier. And Live Lit survived a lot of things. I hope it survives this big shakeup because we lost our venue. The coffee shop closed down just before coronavirus shut everything else down. So we moved to a different cafe, I hope that cafe survives. Crema Coffee here in San Jose. I hope they survive because they were great, and I'd like to be able to bring Live Lit back. I haven't done it online because every open mic online feels the exact same. It's a bunch of squares on a screen, each one taking a turn reading a poem, and it's just. I'm glad that it's there for people, but I miss it being live. I miss it being in person. So yeah, so I started Live Lit to give the community something to something reliable, something they knew they could go to every week to listen or to share, and that was it.
I kind of have the same sentiments about some of these open mics. Is that if it's the same group of people, then it gets very depressing because it's kind of like this sad imitation of what once was. But when it's people from all over the country, those are kind of exciting. When it's people from all over the place, because then you're focused on what's interesting and exciting about the internet. Whereas like distance doesn't really matter. You don't have to fly out. Like your story from like about Def Poetry Jam, right? None of that wouldn't even matter if it was like Def Poetry Zoom. Like I don't know if it's as successful as a poetry Zoom, but so that's more exciting, right, about the internet. So I think if we curate things that feature what's more exciting about the internet as opposed to what's less exciting, I think that's like that's the way to go right now. I want to ask you a question though, because you've been doing a lot of these, right? You've been doing not necessarily open mic, but you've been like doing performances and
quite a few,
yeah. Have you gotten to the point now where you're like setting up the background or doing something to like kind of like have a unique Zoom way?
No.
So what I've been doing is this, like shaking up things, like having like kind of like I become like my own independent film director, shaking the phone around, shaking the laptop, like a Blair Witch, the Evil Witch.
Yeah. Like you're running from something no one can see. Yeah.
Exactly. And actually, it actually changed one of my poems, like the delivery of it, not the lines, but like this one part where I'm like very like evil. Instead of I started laughing like that.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm gonna keep that because I could see myself, and it was like funny. Yeah. And I couldn't be like evil, and I couldn't face my evil face, so I had to be like, and it actually turned out better. So
yeah, I haven't changed. I mean, my performances have changed dramatically because I realized like the microphone's right here. You can hear me just fine. I don't need to shout. I don't need to project. I haven't had to project in a while. On my block, we at 7:00 we cheer for the essential workers and all the frontline folks who are still out there working, and we just cheer for a couple of minutes, clapping and woohooing and blowing whistles and horns and stuff. And that's the loudest I get each day. And it's weird. I look forward to it. I look forward to going out and yelling. I look forward to going out and being loud and screaming. It's a really strange release. But I also am fascinated with how, because I know so many performers, I'm so curious at how this new sort of subtlety in performance is going to translate onto live stages again. Because everyone's way more subtle than they were. Every performer.
I'm in a frenzied flight from subtlety, so that's why I'm doing this Blair Witch kind of thing. I have figured, I have loopholed, my friend.
That's great. That's great. I'm glad somebody has. I feel like we're I think performances are now's the time to experiment. Because it's like. Now's the time to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to come out of this thing a little different. We all are. So you might as well design that difference, right? You might as well say, I'm going to have a hand in how I represent myself from here on out. And that could be like who you are at work, who you are at school, who you are to your friends, who you are to your family, like it's an opportunity to prepare for boldness, And I think that this is a shitty gift to be given, but if you can see it, if you can see times within this shitty gift as a true gift, you are going to benefit from it. You are going to get something out of it, aside from just EBT,
So we got a comment from the comment section. Not a question. We got the question. It says, oh, the comment says, "Yo," from
Yo,
Davenport Jr.
Darnell Davenport Jr. Hello, Darnell Davenport
Poetic.
Jr. Do you know Darnell?
AK, yeah, it's Mr. Poetic
Mr. Poetic.
from Los Angeles, California.
Well, hello, Mr. Poetic.
He was the Grand Slam champion of the Poetry Lounge in 09.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a big ass slam.
Indeed it is. Indeed it is. No, me and Poetic, me and Darnell, we used to go around LA all the time and do shows and whatever. So great poet.
How many? So
Great guy. We're friends. Great friend.
Mr. Poetic. I can appreciate good friends. Did you now when you were both going around hitting up venues? How many venues were you hitting up in what year did you start out?
I started in 08. We met in 09, but I think between 2010, 2011, there were all these like mini money slams that popped up in the LA, Orange County, IE area. I don't know why. I don't know if it's still going on, but there were like these things that people just did not know about. And like all the people that like traditionally slam for teams did not know about. So me and Darnell would go around hustling these slams for money. Like, because they didn't know us either. There were just people that just throwing on slams, like like at churches, this, that, and we would just go and take that money.
Yeah,
for like it was like 4 or 5.
Go snatch that paper.
Yeah. And they were for like $200. They were like for like 150, 300. I mean,
oh yeah. And were these one-off slams, or were these like constant?
Almost like the circus came to town, like the traveling circus.
Oh yeah.
Instead, the circus was getting hustled, not the circus.
Well, I remember hearing about like these $10,000 slams. I think there was one in Sacramento. There was one in Florida, I think. I mean, there were several over the course of the last 15 years. There have been quite a few big money slams, and there was always a point where like no one was ever on agreement on who won. It was always like, man, I can't believe that person won. They must have had a friend in the judges, like no one ever wanted any person to win. It was always like when it came to the money slams, people were always like out for blood. But when it comes to like team slams, it's always like, oh, it's all about the love. It's all about the community. It's like, well, it's also about the points though too.
Well, no. Me and Darnell were really good friends, so sometimes we would like split the money, or whatever. But like
that's great, yeah.
But but there was a cutthroat element because we wouldn't tell anybody else about them.
Right. Yeah, of course. No, I know how it is. I mean, like that's. I mean, how can you? It's like I never understood. Right, it's money. You don't want a better poet to come in and take your opportunity, right?
It wasn't glory. It's money. Right.
It's money.
I don't even want anyone that's half as good as me to come in. I don't
right.
care. It's money.
Right.
So I'd rather nobody of any quality or worth enter the building, But so that.
And that's the thing, right? Is that slam breeds competition hard.
Yeah.
And so for anyone to come in and say it's not about the points, it's about the poetry. It's like then go to a poetry open mic. Right. Like if it's about the poetry, then let's forego all prizes and all points and just have a lovely reading. No one wants that. You don't really want that. If it wasn't about the points, you wouldn't be there.
If it was for like, if for like the glory or this or that, then you compete, you come, you take your losses, you win, you lose, right? And you want to like rise to challenge your rival. Where this was money, so like I don't like right. Like Tim agreed that like, hey, I forget the point system worked out, but it was just like, okay, we'll just do this, but we weren't telling anybody else about these
right.
things.
And I mean, like, and I've been in situations where I've offered to people, I'm like, hey, no matter what the outcome is, there's a good cash prize. Let's just divvy it up, like all the competitors backstage, we all agree, like no matter who wins, we're going to take all three prize first, second, and third place, and we're just going to combine them together and divide them equally. And then we can just go out there and not worry about it being a competition. Just go do the best job you can. Most people never wanted to do it.
No, they don't. I remember one time there was a slam in LA. I actually had Javon Johnson on here, and he said something like, and I remember him saying the slam like, all right, who's taking second place? And he said that as he took off his jacket, like he threw off his jacket. He was like, who's taking second place? And I think he may have even flexed.
Yeah, I would not be surprised. That is the most Javon Johnson statement there is. That's gonna be on his crypt.
Who's taking second?
Yeah.
I think Larry Bird might have said that first at the shooting contest, but
that's fair.
Yeah,
I'm sure somebody has said it over several times over the last couple hundred years. Since the days of competition. I tell you, Slam was a fun beast. It was a wild ride. I don't know quite what it's like now. I imagine that it's got a lot of the same vibe, but it's supposed to change. If you looked at Slam in the 80s, it looked like a lot of beat poets and a lot of like older crowd, doing their talking about how like, I really like this hip hop thing I'm hearing from the streets. Oh, right. I cannot wait to try it myself. Yeah. And then I'm going to go to this is the rap I wrote on my yacht, it's not for you, and that's how I feel about Slam. It's like, it's not for me anymore. That's not my field. That's not my, no one who doesn't know who I am wants me getting on their stage, like I'm an old white dude now, and while I know deep down inside, I'm like trying to be like, an understanding, compassionate old white dude. I know my place, and my place is not on a Slam stage. Like, no one wants to hear a 44-year-old person lament things the same way a 17-year-old would. No one wants to hear that. And that's kind of what you have to do in order to make it in Slam. That you have to lament in the same way. You have to complain in the same way. Yeah. And if I'm 44, if I'm 36, if I'm 32, and I'm getting up on a Slam stage and I'm complaining about things the same way a teenager might, like, okay, you need to grow up and you need to buy lottery tickets if you want to win money, because that's lame. That's whack.
Tell people they do want to hear. How can they follow up with you, Mike, and where can they find out what you're up to?
MightyMikeMcGee.com. You'll find all my stuff there. And then, I use the Instagrams and the Twitter a lot. And those are all, you can just, if you Google Mighty Mike McGee, you'll find me. There's only a few of us. So, but right now, lately, all I've been doing primarily is taking a lot of Zoom meetings, which is annoying, and trying to do more workshop stuff. Oh, and reading to kids on Facebook Live. But yeah, so I've been kind of organizing my room, organizing my computers, organizing my online presence. Just organizing, and then once I get all this cleaned up, then I'm going to go out into my front yard and clean that up. And then once I get that cleaned up, I'm going to clean up my street, and then my city, and then the state of California,
so cleaning it up. Yeah.
Starting small and working out,
I like it.
I
like it. Well, thank you, Mike, so much for your time. And hopefully we'll be talking soon.
Yeah. It's great to see you, Matt.
It's great to see you, Mike.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.